This episode is brought to you by Peacock. The new Peacock original documentary, Matthew Perry, A Hollywood Tragedy, dives deep into the beloved actor's rise to fame and his tragic death. 5 people, including Perry's personal assistant, 2 medical doctors, and an alleged Hollywood drug dealer known as the Ketamine Queen, were charged with conspiracy to illegally provide Perry with the ketamine. Explore the details of the case in this heartbreaking special, streaming now only on Peacock.
Hey, today on CityCast Philly. Interesting fact about Pennsylvania. There are no national parks in the state. Sure, there's tons of beautiful scenic destinations, like Lake Erie or the Appalachian ridgeline, but not a park with the coveted national park status. Kyle Bagenstose, a freelance journalist here in the city, investigated what it would take to get this designation. His story, Pennsylvania deserves a national park, ran in Philly Magazine. It's Thursday, March 6th. I'm Trenae Nuri, and here's what Philly's talking about. Kyle, you're no stranger to the national park system in America. You've been to trips to visit Maine, Utah, Colorado, and South Carolina?
That's right. Yep. I've had the opportunity and privilege to go around the country and see a lot of our national parks, particularly out west where a lot of them are. But I've been trying to hit up the little bit that we have here in the East and Mid-Atlantic area.
16 national parks you've been to.
That's right. Yep. I think that's the current count.
Okay. Favorite one?
That's a tough one. Zion in Utah, Southwest Utah, is amazing. Desertscape, but a lot of green. But I actually think a little further east of there, Bryce Canyon National Park in Utah is this amazing thing. They got these things called the hoodoos. They're like little pillars, rock pillars that stick up everywhere. And it's just like a completely different landscape than I've seen anywhere. I think that was the one that was the most magical for me.
But none in Pennsylvania. So Pennsylvania, in your opinion, deserves one. So why don't we have a national park?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure the entire history of why Pennsylvania doesn't have one and if when I was ever seriously considered here. I know generally they're hard to get done in the East. You know, out west, there's a lot of open space, a lot of land. The federal government owns a lot of it. So when national parks start popping up in the early 20th century and throughout that century, you know, it's easier for the federal government to go and designate a national park out west than it is in the East, right, where a lot of landowners are already there, a lot of competing interests, just a little bit tougher to get done politically. So I think that's probably a big reason why generally we don't have one in Pennsylvania or in the Mid-Atlantic more at large. And that's certainly some of the themes that I explore in the piece now about why there are challenges to getting one done in our era.
What could a national park mean for Pennsylvania? Like more tourism or something?
Yeah, I guess nowhere really needs one. You know, the national parks have been called America's best idea. We kind of started this whole idea of setting these large plots of land together for the public benefit. So there's something, I think, romantic about having a national park and designating it. You know, in practical matters, yes, I think tourism is often a very big reason. I think a statistic I cite in my story, which comes from a study, was that designating a national park increases about on average 21% your visitation. So you have a plot of land that maybe doesn't have any real change except it gets the name national park. Suddenly, you know, 20% more people are showing up. And oftentimes, you know, these are people with means. They're driving in, they're bringing their family. They got to eat, they got to sleep, they got to do all these things. And you can have an influx of dollars. And of course, I think it just helps generally a state's profile, right? Maybe families don't just go to the national park, they travel elsewhere in the state. So yeah, I think it can be a kind of economic, reputational type boost.
Okay, so why are you on this mission to get a national park in Pennsylvania?
Yeah, you know, it's funny. I don't view myself as somebody who's really pushing for this. I think it's interesting. I personally would like to see one, but I'm also very aware of the drawbacks from national parks, which are discussed in my story a little bit. You know, all those extra people showing up on the visitation can also create a burden for local communities and indeed for the landscapes which we want. So, you know, my idea here for Hawk Mountain was to see if I could maybe propose just the best of both worlds. Start at a national park so you get some of that influx and some of that reputation, and also I think for people not just from far away, but here in the Philly region, right, being able to get connected to a national park for the first time, but maybe doing so in a way that limits some of those drawbacks, some of the negative aspects that often come along with national parks.
You mentioned Hawk Mountain, which is about 90 minutes outside of Philadelphia. I recently went to Hawk Mountain. I chaperoned my daughter's fifth grade class trip there, and I was just blown away. It was so beautiful. And the drive up there, now it did take a little while for me. I went to a Sheetz.
That is Sheetz country, yeah.
Right. But it was just so beautiful. And I really didn't know that all of the years of advocacy work that Hawk Mountain has done, especially with the sanctuary. Can you talk a little bit more about why you have Hawk Mountain as maybe a possible place for a national park in Pennsylvania?
Yeah, I grew up in Berks County, going to Hawk Mountain with Boy Scouts and everything. So it's a place that's really dear to me. Amazing views, seeing these raptors during migration just come soaring down the ridgeline there, south in the fall and north in the spring. It's internationally recognized, flyway for these raptors of all kinds, hawks and eagles and everything. And
so like birds of prey.
Birds of prey, yes. So it has this beautiful scenery, as you saw when you went up there, kind of sweeping views of that kind of ridge and valley landscape common across Pennsylvania. But as I've become an environmental journalist, I've learned a lot more about the fascinating history of Hawk Mountain that I think adds even more merit for it being a national park. And that is that a woman named Rosalie Edge started this during the suffrage era. And, she was kind of a member of these early conservation organizations, and she didn't feel like they were doing enough, very white male dominated space. They weren't doing enough to stop the slaughter of thousands and thousands of raptors on Hawk Mountain. People used to go up there with shotguns and just kill them, as many as you could at a time. There's pictures of them piled up into giant heaps of dead raptors. And basically, she just starts buying up acreage, doing it herself. We're going to create the world's first sanctuary for raptors. They were viewed as kind of a nuisance species prior to that. So, first of its kind in the world that way, world-renowned research area today for raptors, and beautiful landscapes enjoyed, as you know, by everybody and their families. Just a lot going for it in terms of a national park credential.
Yeah, I would say bring some water, for sure, if you go up some of the mountains. We've got more on this conversation of why Pennsylvania needs a national park after the break.
Take me out to the ball game.
What are you doing?
Did you know DirecTV has the most MLB games?
So, you're singing.
Yeah, they put your favorite teams front and center right when you turn it on. Buy me some cold cuts and flapjacks.
Those aren't even the words.
I'm allergic to peanuts.
Stream DirecTV, home of the most MLB games. Visit directtv.com. Claim based on total games offered on national and regional sports networks. RSNs available with choice package or higher. Availability of RSNs varies by zip code and package.
Hey, Fidelity. How can I remember to invest every month?
With the Fidelity app, you can choose a schedule and set up recurring investments in stocks and ETFs.
Oh, that sounds easier than I thought.
You got this.
Yeah, I do. Now, where did I put my keys?
You will find them where you left them.
Investing involves risk, including risk of loss. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC, member NYSE, SIPC.
Okay, Kyle. So how do the curators of Hawk Mountain feel about the idea of maybe having this get that national park designation?
Yeah. That's a little tough to know. I had a pair of conversations with Sean Grace, who I believe is the president of Hawk Mountain Sanctuary. One very early when I was just kind of getting rolling. It was a very interesting conversation about how, I expected him to kind of say, nah, I don't think this is any merit. He was kind of open to the whole idea. He likes having conversations about ways to get people interested in natural landscapes and connect them to it. As I went on through my reporting over weeks and months, I started talking to more and more people. I assumed maybe the word started getting out there a little bit. Who is this guy? What is he asking about? How serious is this? And I had a little trouble getting him for our second conversation. Still very nice, very gracious, but definitely a little bit more, we got to be careful here as an organization how much credence we're gonna give to this thing. I think probably it feels like a bit of a pipe dream. So how much is it really worth going on the record for and saying? So, very kind of ambiguous. I'm not sure what the average person in leadership at Hawk Mountain would think of this idea. I did say I was kind of surprised by, I talked to the local mayor of Hamburg, which is the most significant town nearby, talked to the police chief there, and some other people with the Tourism Bureau in Berks County, and they seem kind of interested in this idea or open to it. I think there's a lot of development kind of pushing into that northern Berks County area, concerns about some warehouses and things like that. So I think they're looking at maybe this is a way, actually, we could try and control some of the development here, right? A lot of times people are worried about this huge influx and the changing vibes of an area off a national park. Well, maybe this is actually a way to protect some of that landscape versus, heavy development of warehouses and real estate coming in. And then I think, one of the really interesting things to me right at the end of the story, I talk about one of the last things I did for reporting was go to Hawk Mountain and just kind of sit up there at the lookouts and look at the hawks and just kind of take in the vibes. And there was an older gentleman next to me there who lived there his whole life at the base of the mountain, was a high school professor or high school teacher nearby. And I kind of just said, what do you think? Thinking he was going to say, nah, we don't want a bunch of people coming in here. And he just kind of put his finger over the whole valley, the landscape, and said, yeah, this could work for a national park. That was one of those moments where I'm like, man, I don't know. I don't know what to think here.
Okay, well, if not Hawk Mountain, are there other places in Pennsylvania that maybe could work as a national park?
Yeah, I think a really instructive example I talk about in the piece is the Delaware Water Gap, which is in northeast Pennsylvania. For anybody who's been there, they know it's another beautiful landscape right along the Delaware River where, the border with New Jersey on their side. There's backpacking there. There's a lot of paddling. There's even a shuttle service where you can kayak down the river and just get shuttled back. I mean, really a nice kind of just natural wonderland playground. The former park administrator there has been pushing over the past couple years to turn that. It's currently a national recreation area, a separate designation than a national park. So he's been trying to get it actually into that national park territory, make it, I think, what would be our nation's 64th national park. And he's received tremendous pushback, a lot of it from the locals there who just don't want the land turned to a national park, don't want the additional people kind of showing up. So that's probably, like Exhibit A in terms of other places. But there's any number of places in Pennsylvania that could be a national park. Allegheny National Forest in the northwest, Erie and their beautiful lakeshore up in the northwest as well. Laurel Highlands in southwest Pennsylvania. I actually haven't been there, but I know it's supposed to be one of the more beautiful landscapes and greater places to hike in the state. So yeah, I think there's any number of places that you could look at. And as somebody who's been to some of the quote unquote lesser national parks on the East Coast, I could definitely attest that I think any of these places would be fit for it.
So it seems like the conversations that you've had with folks, maybe not, to the idea of a national park. What's the process like to getting federal support?
It's a congressional designation. It's a congressional decision. So the key players here are, oftentimes the Congress people, right, for the area. If the delegation from Pennsylvania comes out in Congress and says, hey, we really support this, I don't think the people of Ohio or Utah or anybody's going to get in their way. So it's a lot about trying to get the Congress people to your side. But of course, they're going to be paying attention to the local politics of this, right? And especially when you start entering areas of land ownership, right? So Hawk Mountain, you would need to collect a lot of different landowners to all kind of get on board with this. There's the state owes some land. Hawk Mountain is a private sanctuary. There's Hamburg, the township or the borough owns a good portion of the mountain, which they use to protect as a water source. So you'd have to, I think, get a lot of people on board to all basically give the okay, and then it would go to the Congress people to move forward with it.
Kyle, you're a nature lover, and I'm starting to get used to it too. How do you convince Philadelphians to get out and explore the state's already existing park system? What's the pitch to city dwellers to get out into nature more?
Yeah, there's definitely been conversations about trying to get more people into the outdoors, open up access to communities that may not historically have been there. Since George Floyd in 2020, there were incidents around the same time of a gentleman who's a black birder in Central Park having the police called on him just when he was out birding and having a little incident there.
I remember that.
And there's been some local things happening. There's a gentleman named Jason Hall who runs the In Color Birding Club, who he started after that, where he tries to get more Black Philadelphians and people in the area out there into the outdoors doing bird watching. And he actually runs a bus a couple times a year, takes a bus trip from Philadelphia to Hawk Mountain so that people can go and feel like they're going in a group that they're comfortable with instead of just showing up there for the first time. So I think there's definitely really interesting things happening in that space. And is also why I think this Hawk Mountain idea is so interesting, is because there is an effort that sounds like it's going to happen to restore train service from Philadelphia to Reading. And there's already an old-timey kind of short line train that runs from Reading right to the base of Hawk Mountain. So if you connect everything, someone could get on the train at 30th Street Station. There's talk about maybe a North Philadelphia stop. And if you align the schedules just right, within 2 hours, arriving right at the foot of Hawk Mountain. And I think that would just be a tremendous opportunity to try and get people, connect people that haven't been to maybe a natural landscape like that at all, or certainly not a national park, to be able to have that opportunity leaving right from Center City, Philadelphia, and getting there within just a couple of hours to do some hiking.
Well, let me get a ticket. That was Kyle Bagenstose, freelance journalist here in the city. Kyle, thanks so much for joining me today on CityCast Philly.
Yep, thank you for having me.
Read Kyle's full story in Philly Mag about his exploration of a possibility of getting a national park in the Commonwealth. We'll have a link in the show notes. And listen back to our best day hikes near Philly episode. We'll have that in the show notes. That's all for today here on CityCast Philly. Let us know what you think of this episode about a potential Pennsylvania National Park. And tell a friend. Rate the show, leave us a review, and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to sign up for our morning newsletter, Hey Philly, to learn more about what else Philly's talking about. Listen, we'll be back tomorrow morning with the Friday News Roundup. Talk to you then. Bye.